This happened a few years ago when I was working at a clothing store in a mall. I mostly worked evening shifts, and sometimes I stayed late to help close up or restock shelves. One night, I was the last employee left in the mall. The mall had closed for about 30 minutes, but I was finishing some paperwork in the back office. My store was on the second floor, and to get to the employee parking garage, I needed to take the elevator down to the first floor. At around 10:30 p.m., I packed my stuff and headed toward the elevator. The hallway was dim, lit only by a few emergency lights. It smelled like the usual, a mix of old carpet and faint cleaning chemicals. I pressed the elevator button. It dinged, the doors slid open, and I stepped inside. There was already a man in the elevator, tall, wearing a dark jacket and jeans, and he looked normal, just standing near the back wall, staring straight ahead. I figured he was probably a mall employee or maybe a security guard. I stepped in and pressed the button for the first floor. The doors slid closed, and the elevator started, moving down. For a few seconds, everything was quiet except for the soft hum of the elevator. Then the man turned his head slowly and looked at me. He smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was too wide, and his eyes were cold and empty. I felt my skin crawl but said nothing. The elevator stopped suddenly between the second and first floors, jolting me forward. The lights flickered for a moment, then went out completely. We were plunged into darkness. I froze. The man laughed softly in the dark. It was low, almost a whisper, but filled with amusement. "Don't worry," he said, voice calm. "We'll be stuck here for a while." I tried to stay calm. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. His face appeared in the light. The smile hadn't gone away. I pressed the emergency button, but nothing happened. No sound, no response. I asked him if he could press the button, but he just chuckled and shook his head. The silence felt heavy. I couldn't hear any noises from outside. No footsteps, no voices, no alarms. Minutes passed, maybe 10 or 15. I kept my phone's flashlight pointed at him. Suddenly, he leaned toward me and whispered, "You look scared. You should be." I took a step back, bumping into the elevator wall. The lights flickered back on just as suddenly as they went out, and the elevator jerked upward. The doors opened on the second floor. The man stepped out without a word, disappearing into the dark hallway. I stood there, heart pounding, not sure if I should follow or run. I waited a moment, then pressed the button again for the first floor. The elevator moved down normally this time. When I got to the parking garage, I hurried to my car, checking behind me every few steps. I never saw that man again, and I told my manager what happened. They said maybe it was just a power glitch and someone else had been stuck in the elevator, but no one reported being there. The worst part is, I still don't know who that man was, or why he was there. Sometimes, when I enter elevators now, I get the same cold feeling in my stomach. A couple of years ago, I was working a closing shift at a big mall. My job was to make sure all the stores were locked up and the security alarms were set. It was usually an easy job, but one night, it got really strange, and I still can't explain what happened. I was working alone that night. Most of the stores closed by 9:30 p.m., and the mall was supposed to be empty by 10. I had a checklist of stores to visit, and I was walking through the mall corridor, double-checking that every door was locked. The mall was eerily quiet. The usual noise of shoppers, footsteps, and music was gone. Instead, there was a low hum from the air conditioning and the occasional beep of a security sensor. I was near the food court when I noticed something odd. A light was still on inside a small store, one that should have been closed. It was a little gift shop, tucked away near the corner. The light was dim, like someone had turned on a nightlight. I thought maybe the owner forgot to turn it off, so I decided to check it out. When I got to the door, I found it unlocked. That surprised me. I looked inside, and the store looked empty. No sign anyone was there. I shut the door and locked it myself, but the light stayed on. I pulled out my walkie-talkie and tried calling the security office, but there was no response. Static only. Feeling a little uneasy, I kept moving, finishing my rounds. After about 15 minutes, I realized I didn't recognize where I was. The hallway looked different. The shops looked unfamiliar, like the mall had changed layout. Stopped and looked around. The signs were all there, but the names of the stores didn't match what I remembered. Some stores had old signs or ones I'd never seen before. I checked my phone for the time. It was just after 10 p.m., so I should have been near the main entrance. I started walking back the way I came, but the hallway seemed longer, darker. The lights flickered overhead. The air smelled stale, like no one had been there for a while. I felt a creeping coldness run down my spine. I passed a food court, but it was empty and looked like it hadn't been cleaned in weeks. Trash was scattered on the floor. The smell of old food mixed with dust filled the air. I tried to open a door that should have led to the parking garage, but it was locked tight. I checked my phone again. No signal. Panic started to rise in my chest. I kept walking, trying every door I could find, but none of them led outside. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Slow, soft, deliberate. I stopped and looked back, but there was no one there. Just the long, empty corridor stretching behind me. I kept moving faster, but the footsteps continued, matching my pace exactly. I finally reached a stairwell. I rushed inside and ran down the stairs. When I reached the bottom, I expected to see the parking garage. Instead, I found another long hallway, dark, cold, and empty. I could hear my breathing echo off the walls. I felt like I was trapped in some endless maze. The flickering lights started to dim one by one, until I was almost in complete darkness. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. A message appeared. From an unknown number, it said, "You're not supposed to be here." I dropped the phone. A cold breeze swept past me, even though there were no windows or vents nearby. I turned to run back up the stairs, but the door slammed shut on its own. I pounded on it, yelling for help, but no one answered. The footsteps came again, closer this time. I felt a breath on the back of my neck. I spun around, but I was alone. I don't know how, but after what felt like hours, the door to the stairwell opened. I ran through it and finally found the exit doors to the parking garage. When I got outside, the fresh air felt like a blessing. I called security, but they told me no other employees were in the mall after closing. Asked about the gift shop light, but no one knew anything about it. I quit that job the next day. Sometimes when I walk past that mall at night, I swear I see lights flickering inside and hear footsteps behind me, even when the place is closed. And I still wonder, what was that place I got lost in? This happened when I was 19. I was at the mall alone on a weekday afternoon. I had just gotten out of a morning class and decided to kill time at the mall before heading home. It was pretty empty, maybe because it was a Tuesday around 2 p.m. There's this one clothing store I like. Not too expensive, quiet, and usually empty. I wandered in, grabbed a few shirts, and headed to the changing rooms in the back. The changing rooms were in a narrow hallway with a large mirror on the wall across from them. The hallway had maybe 5 stalls, and when I got there, all were empty except for the one at the very end. I could see someone's legs behind the curtain. I went into the second stall from the front. As I tried on the first shirt, I heard a quiet cough from the last stall. It sounded dry, almost like someone clearing their throat. I didn't think anything of it at first, but then, while I was changing into the second shirt, I heard it again. The same dry cough, then silence. Then, a whisper. It was so soft I almost thought I imagined it. Something like, "Nice shirt." I froze. I stood completely still, my shirt half on. I waited for a second. Nothing. I thought maybe the person was on the phone or talking to themselves. Weird, but not impossible. But then I heard it again, clearer this time. "That one looks better on you." This wasn't in my head. Someone was watching me. I slowly turned and looked at the curtain behind me. It was closed, but I had checked. The stalls were separated. There was no way someone could see into mine, unless they were underneath. I crouched quickly and looked. Under my stall, I saw 2 legs, but not in the stall next to me. They were in my stall. Someone was curled up under the bench behind me. I jumped back and hit the curtain, yanking it open. I backed into the hallway, my heart pounding. From the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Someone crawling out of my stall on all 4s. I turned and ran straight to the front of the store. I told the girl at the counter that someone was hiding in the changing rooms. She looked confused and walked back with me, but when we got there, all the stalls were empty, even the one at the end. The girl looked annoyed and said, "Maybe it was someone messing around." But I know what I saw. I left my shirts on the floor and walked straight out of the store. As I left, I felt like someone was watching me, like eyes were following me from inside. I looked back, half expecting to see someone peeking from behind a clothes rack, but it was empty. I didn't go back to that mall for weeks. When I finally did, I noticed something. That store, it had been closed down. Gate rolled down. Sign removed. Empty shelves. I asked someone who worked at the pretzel place next to it if they knew what happened. She said the store closed fast, like overnight. Said there were rumors of someone getting caught hiding in the ceiling, watching people change. Security found a man living in the crawl space above the changing rooms. They found a mattress, food wrappers, a bucket, and a hole. A hole in the ceiling tiles above the last stall. I thought back to that day, that cough, the whisper, the legs behind the curtain, and I realized something. When I got to the changing rooms, I had only seen 1 pair of legs in the last stall. But if the guy was hiding in mine the whole time, then whose legs did I see? This happened when I worked part-time at a shoe store in our local mall. I was 20 at the time, going to college and working evening shifts to pay for gas and books. It was a small store near one of the exits, not one of those huge chains. We sold mostly sneakers and work boots, and it wasn't very busy most days. I usually worked the closing shift with one other employee, but that night I was alone. The other guy had called out sick, and my manager asked if I could close by myself. I'd done it once or twice before, so I said sure. The mall closed at 9 p.m., but the store had to be cleaned and locked up afterward. By 8:30, the place was dead. No customers, no one walking around, just silence. At 8:45, I started straightening the shelves, picking up empty boxes, and turning off a few of the lights in the back. I did a walkthrough to make sure no one was still inside. The store had a front entrance and a back door that led to a storage room and then out to the employee hallway. I checked both. Everything looked normal. By 9:05, the front gate was pulled down and locked. I was just finishing up mopping a spill in the back when I heard something fall, hard, out front. It sounded like a shoebox had been knocked off a shelf. I froze. The store was locked. No one should be inside. I turned off the mop and walked slowly to the front. At first, I didn't see anything. Then I noticed a single shoebox sitting in the middle of the floor, lid off, one boot halfway out. It hadn't been there before. I looked around. No one. I bent down, picked it up, and put it back on the shelf. I was trying to convince myself I must have left it out. Or maybe it slipped somehow. Then, I heard a whisper. Not words, just the sound of someone exhaling through their mouth. I turned around fast. Again, no one. I walked the entire store 3 times. Even checked the fitting bench area under the seats and behind the stockroom door. Nothing. I went back to the counter, grabbed my stuff, and was ready to leave. Just as I unlocked the back door to exit into the employee hallway, I heard something click behind me. It was the sound of the cash register drawer popping open. I hadn't touched it in over an hour. I slowly walked back toward the counter. The drawer was open, just sitting there like someone had pressed the button. I closed it and stood there, listening. Then I heard the worst part. The creak of one of the benches in the fitting area. You know how they groan when someone sits down on them? That sound. Ducked behind the counter and peeked over it. There was someone sitting on the bench. I couldn't see them clearly. Just a shadowy figure, head down, still. I stayed crouched behind the counter for maybe a full minute, heart pounding so loud I thought they'd hear it. Then I slowly stood up and said, "Hey, we're closed." The person didn't move. I cleared my throat louder. "Sir, we're closed." Nothing. I grabbed the phone and dialed mall security. I told them someone had stayed inside after closing and wasn't responding. They said they'd send someone over in 5 minutes. I hung up and peeked again. The bench was empty. I hadn't heard them move. Not a single step. I walked toward it slowly, scanning everywhere. Then I noticed the back room door, the one I had just come from, was cracked open. I hadn't left it open. I walked back, this time holding a metal broom in one hand. I pushed the door wide and turned on the light. There was no one, but one of the stacked boxes had been pulled down, and on top of it was a sneaker, just one. And inside the sneaker was a crumpled photo. It was a printed security photo, black and white. It showed me, standing behind the counter, taken from the corner camera. I stared at it for a long time, then I locked everything up and ran. Mall security checked the store and didn't find anyone, but I know someone had been there, and they hadn't come through the front, which means they were in the store before closing. They had waited and watched. I was working part-time at a small electronics store in a big mall during my last year of high school. It was a simple job, stocking shelves, helping customers with headphones or phone chargers, mostly boring stuff. But one night, something happened that still haunts me. The mall had started closing at 10 p.m., and I was on the closing shift, working alone after my coworker left at 8:30. Around 9:45, I was almost done cleaning the store, wiping counters and putting away displays. The place was mostly empty, just a couple of other shops still open nearby, but the mall was definitely winding down. Suddenly, the mall intercom system crackled on. It was a strange sound, like static mixed with a faint humming. I froze because the intercom was supposed to be off after 9:30 unless mall security used it. A voice came through. It was low, almost a whisper. I could barely make out what it was saying. I leaned in closer to the speaker on the ceiling. The voice said, "Are you alone? I'm watching you." My heart stopped. I looked around the store, half expecting to see someone sneaking in. But the door was locked, and I hadn't seen anyone enter for at least an hour. I told myself it must be some kind of prank, maybe a malfunction or an employee messing around in another part of the mall. I tried to shake it off. Then the voice came again, clearer this time. "Don't turn around." I couldn't believe it. My skin crawled, and the hairs on my neck stood up. I looked toward the door, then back at the speaker. My hands were shaking. Reached for my phone to call security, but dropped it. It hit the floor with a loud thud. The voice whispered, "I see you." I snapped my head around, looking toward the empty mall corridor through the store's glass front. Nothing. I ran to the door and locked it, fumbling with the keys. I could hear the voice again, but now it was barely audible, almost like it was coming from inside the walls. "Turn off the lights." My fingers trembled as I switched off the main lights, leaving only the faint glow from a small display behind the counter. I crouched behind the counter, heart pounding. Every small noise seemed magnified. The hum of the air conditioning, distant, footsteps echoing somewhere far down the hall. I thought maybe it was a sick joke, but no one else was in the mall. I even texted my manager, but no reply. Minutes passed like hours. Then the intercom crackled again. Static, then silence. I stood up slowly, looking for any sign of movement. The store looked empty, nothing out of place. I grabbed my bag and tried the door again. It was locked tight. I headed toward the employee hallway at the back. That's when I heard it. Soft breathing. Not outside. Inside the store, behind one of the tall shelves near the entrance. I held my breath and crept toward the shelf, gripping my bag like a weapon. The breathing stopped when I got closer. I leaned around the corner. Nothing there. Just an empty space between two shelves. Then a soft thump behind me. I whipped around. Nothing. I ran through the back exit to the employee hallway and locked the door behind me. The mall was dark and empty, quiet except for distant cleaning machines. Called security again. Finally got someone on the phone. They said they'd send a guard right away. I waited in the break room, but no one showed for almost 20 minutes. When the guard finally arrived, we went back into the store. We found no one. No footprints, no sign anyone had been inside, besides me. But the intercom system, it was dead. They checked the control room and said no one had accessed it since closing. I never worked that late shift again, and I never heard a voice on the mall intercom like that ever again. But sometimes, when I walk past the mall at night, I swear I hear whispers through the speakers, calling my name.